Hello, I'm John Molesky, and this is Wilson Center Now, a production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. My guest today is David Ottaway. David is a fellow with the Wilson Center's Middle East program and has been covering the region as a correspondent for the Washington Post, as a bureau chief, as a scholar since the 1970s for part of 6 decades. His most recent book is called Mohammed bin Salman, the Icarus of Saudi Arabia, with a question mark. David attempts to answer that question. David, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Show people the cover of the book, terrific book, which I just finished reading last night before we spoke today. One of the first things you write in the book, David, is you describe yourself as having an insatiable career-long fascination with the Middle East. Tell us about that. How early did that start and what sparked it?
Well, particularly in the Middle East, it really is focused on Saudi Arabia.
On the kingdom itself, yes.
Because it was so difficult to understand. It used to be very difficult to get visas to go there. You have to remember when I first started going there, no embassy was allowed in the capital of the country, Riyadh. They were all in Jeddah. And actually, journalists had more access in some ways than diplomats, but they were kept in Jeddah and needed special permission to go up to talk to members of the government in Riyadh. So it was, a mystery. It's for decades a mystery, very hard to get into, certainly hard to understand the politics of the family, which is still, well, it's become a little bit more transparent, but very difficult to understand what's going on inside the family. The
reporter's
family.
Challenge, right? The challenge of trying to figure this out.
It's just the challenge of it. And it was, to me, it's like an onion, and I'd keep peeling off a layer and there'd be another layer, and trying to get to the heart of the onion was, I don't know whether I've ever arrived there, to tell you the truth, but
yeah. Well, you keep trying. Well, speaking of onions, the protagonist of your book, the Crown Prince, I was thinking before I cracked the book open about historical precedents. Is there anyone who was like him? And then near the conclusion of the book, you look at some historical figures as you're trying to figure out where the MBS story is headed. Is there, if someone is new to the subject matter and trying to understand who this character is there a person in history, or better known in current events, who is a reference point, is like him, or is he unique?
I think he's unique. I looked at parallels with Abdel Nasser, the leader of Egypt, who was, a pan-Arab hero. I looked at Habib Bourguiba, who was the president of Tunisia right after independence and was very bold in his reforms. I looked at the Shah, and I've looked at Mohammed VI, who is the current king of Morocco and also carried out some very bold reforms in their political system. And I didn't find any parallels, really, right from the beginning. I mean, this, to begin with, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, I'll be referring to him as MBS, like everybody else does, had no credentials to become crown prince. He had not been the head of any ministry or proven himself as a statesman abroad, or as a good bureaucrat in how to deal with his own country. He just came out of nowhere at the age of 29 and used his father, who's the king, King Salman, to wiggle his way up to becoming crown prince and probably king of Saudi Arabia for 50 years.
Was the rise driven by strategy on his part, ruthlessness on his part, dumb luck? What were the key factors?
No, I don't think it was dumb luck. I think it was quite deliberate, almost Machiavellian, the way he manipulated the system, and his dad. You have to remember, he got his dad to get rid of 2 crown princes to make way for him. And the way he maneuvered, he seized early on control of the security apparatus of the country. and he kind of discredited or destroyed his opponents and his rivals. And he was, I mean, it's kind of the Game of Thrones, Saudi style,
Mhm.
if I can say. So
Yeah,
no, it's quite deliberate, quite calculated, and quite ruthless.
you write about the Trump factor, or perhaps more appropriately, the Kushner factor, how Kushner and MBS develop a relationship and a rapport. And there are some parallels between the two in terms of their age and their proximity to the throne, so to speak. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, early on, Kushner went out of his way, and so did the Crown Prince, MBS, to get to know each other, to use each other as conduits to the power, to the White House and to the royal court in Saudi Arabia. And they had a lot of conversations that we don't even know about today, and I don't think were ever recorded by the White House or the security people of the United States. Well, maybe it's in the security people somewhere in the archives of the National Security Agency, but certainly he was he developed this very close personal relationship. And, of somewhat similar age, both anxious to prove themselves. And particularly in the Middle East, Kushner hoped to use MBS to develop a relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and MBS hoped to use the relationship to get Trump to move on issues of concern to him, namely Iran. So it was quite a duo, the two of them, and quite successful for most of the time Trump was in office.
And you describe bin Salman as almost the personification of the kingdom, an embodiment of the kingdom in its strengths, its weaknesses, its struggles, its successes, its failures. Can you speak to that a bit? What is it about him that is so in sync with the nation?
I think he symbolizes and really embedded and personifies the Saudi quest for power and glory, to become the leader of the Arab world and to become really one of the most important countries in the world. And Saudi Arabia has been trying to get there for decades, and they've mostly used oil. Their weight in the OPEC, the Organization of Oil Producing Countries, exporting countries, and but that has not been sufficient and has really been waning as a leverage for them. And he's been trying to develop sort of both soft power and hard power to establish Saudi Arabia as certainly the leading Arab power. And he struggled with it, and he hasn't succeeded. And that was kind of my question as I wrote this book. I kept asking myself, why is it that Saudi Arabia, it has tremendous religious authority in the world. It is, after all, the birthplace of Islam. And every year, millions of Muslims come there for the Hajj. So they have tremendous religious soft power. They are the largest Arab economy by far, but even bigger than Egypt, although it has, a fifth of the population or a sixth of the population of Egypt. But they have not figured out, Saudi Arabia has no military throw weight. It has never developed military power. And we are seeing this in Yemen, where they've been at war since 2015, and they're still in a mess there, and they haven't been able to reconquer the country from the Iranian-backed Houthis, and probably are going to have to learn to live with an Iranian-backed regime in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, for decades to come. And they never were able to develop military power, and I explore why that is true, or why that has been the case. And I've also explored why using their diplomatic power has backfired again and again and not really succeeded in helping them get to become the leading power of the Arab world. So that's one theme of the book, you know, why this country, with all its soft and power and diplomatic leverage, has failed to become what it wants to be, which is, as I say, the leader of the Arab world.
And then the self-inflicted wounds, chief among them in recent years, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, who I should mention that not only did you know, but your dedication in the book is partially to him as well. So how seriously did bin Salman damage Saudi Arabia's interests by, as far as all we know, and intelligence tells us that he at least green-lighted the murder, if not ordered it outright? Yeah. How much has that set the country back? And is there a path back to respectability? He's been attempting to reconstitute his image. Is he gaining any traction in that regard?
He has been struggling with that. That's why I say question mark at the end. You know, the Icarus of Saudi Arabia question mark. His fall was incredible. I mean, in 2018, when he came here on a tour of the United States, he put on a PR show, the likes of which I have never seen from a Saudi royal in the 50 years I've been dealing with Saudi Arabia. I mean, he went everywhere. He sought out interviews where usually the royalty, when they come here, they didn't want to have anything to do with the American press. This guy sought out to meet the editorial boards of the Post and the Times and the LA Times and the Wall Street Journal. He did everything to promote his image as a young, dynamic, eager to go new leader of Saudi Arabia. That was in April and May, and then, you know, in October, Jamal Khashoggi was chopped to pieces in a Saudi consulate in Istanbul. I mean, and this just was an incredible shock to everybody. And it certainly changed his image as to what kind of ruler he was, what kind of person he was, that he would go to those lengths to kill, a journalist who was, he was writing editorials for the Washington Post, not editorials, op-ed pieces, not editorials, op-ed pieces, and had become quite influential, but he was hardly, you know, taking down MBS. I mean, he praised MBS for some of the things he was doing. So why he felt he had to eliminate him is the question that remains unanswered, why he felt he had to go to those extremes. But since then, he's been trying to attract Western business, American business, back into the country with some success. And he has been using sports and music and trying to turn Saudi Arabia into a point for tourists internationally to come to, which is quite a change. And and they're developing 9 different touristic points, hotels, using the Red Sea, the charms of the Red Sea to attract people. None of these resorts are open yet, but they're in the works. And so he's using particularly sports, all kinds of sports events are taking place there. He's paying Western bands and musicians. In fact, there's a 4-day music festival on in Riyadh as we talk. And, you know, this is a totally different Saudi Arabia from the one where the Wahhabi clerics did not allow music or any kind of entertainment at all. So he's changed domestically Saudi Arabia quite dramatically. I call it a secular social revolution, which is directly taking on the Wahhabi religious clerics who have tried to keep the kingdom closed and religiously restricted and oriented and no entertainment. So, I mean, domestically, it's quite a change, and he's trying to get this message out and use this to overcome the message, the image that was created by the killing of Jamal Khashoggi.
So his popularity remains high at home while he has become somewhat of a pariah internationally. Do the Saudi people believe that he was behind the murder?
Hard to tell. Hard to tell, or whether they care at this point. You know, he's kept them. There's a kind of bread and circus atmosphere now in Saudi Arabia, which is what the young people and the women have their eyes upon, because he's also been catering to women and opening up the economy to allow them to participate more actively in the economy. And in terms of education, there are more Saudi women now graduating from colleges in Saudi Arabia than men. That had started even before he came into power, but he's definitely trying to empower women economically. Now, when it comes to politics, he has just shut the place down. You can't criticize him. You can't criticize the government. It doesn't matter whether you're a Wahhabi cleric or a Western educated liberal coming back from, 4 years of college in the United States. He has just suppressed all criticism, all politics. And that's the price they are paying right now for this entertainment and change in the social atmosphere of the country.
So with that in mind, what are the reforms actually changing? Are the changes substantive? Are they game changers for the future of the kingdom? Or are they, not to be dismissive, but are they window dressing of a certain type?
No, I think there are different types of reforms. I would consider, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it a reform, but he has silenced the Wahhabi clerics. And before, they were talking all the time and condemning exactly what he's doing now, letting in Western culture and music and entertainment. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of criticism that this is sports washing and that, what he's trying to create the veneer of reform, but it's not substantive. I think he's set loose reforms that are taking on momentum. And, you can't open up the society the way he's done to Western culture, music, entertainment, and just suddenly go back. So I would say he is making progress, substantive progress, both in silencing those who are totally against this and empowering those who want it and are benefiting from it. And if he can continue this for a few more years, I think Saudi Arabia domestically will indeed be a changed place.
What about as an international player, even as the reforms or whatever you want to call them move forward within the country, he has created this ceiling for himself outside of the country because of the Khashoggi murder. Is there any progress to be seen with the kingdom as an international player?
Very slow progress. I mean, he's trying, right now he's trying to repair his relations with the other 5 members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which are the 5 emirates and kingdoms of the Persian Gulf. And he's just gone on a tour to try and mend his relations. They tried to boycott and did in fact boycott Qatar, which is a neighbor, from 2017 to January of this year. And they tried to isolate him because they didn't like Qatar's policies. And above all, they didn't like the fact that Qatar was going its own way and not kowtowing to Saudi diktat. But this caused a lot of trouble for them, and Qatar did fine, survive the boycott. It was an air, land, and sea boycott but Qatar was able to survive it, and now he's given up on that, and he's trying to repair his relations with Qatar. He's trying to reestablish some leadership over the Gulf Cooperation Council. I don't think he's ever going to have the kind of influence that Saudi Arabia used to have, because Qatar and United Arab Emirates, their once closest allies, have really developed their own presence in the sun, their own importance in the world, and have broken away from Saudi Arabia, and I don't think they're going to return. Elsewhere, with the West, he's just had his first Western leader visit him, Macron of France, president of France. He was there just a couple of weeks ago. That's the first Western leader to go there. Okay. The most important observation I'd make about U.S.-Saudi relations is that the personal relationship between President Biden and MBS, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, are basically still frozen. He has not even bothered to call him, which is extraordinary. And it's even more extraordinary because the relations between the two countries have always depended heavily on the personal relationship between the American president and the Saudi ruler, or whoever, the crown prince, whoever was the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. This is totally different in the relations between the two countries. Now, Biden has tried to authorize the Secretary of Defense, Austin, to be the official contact with MBS, because he's also defense minister, in addition to being crown prince. So but the last time Austin was out there visiting Persian Gulf countries, Arab countries, MBS refused to see him, which is also extraordinary. So personal relations between the White House and the royal court are sort of frozen at this point, even as MBS sees people like Jack Sullivan, who is, the National Security Council advisor, and our envoy out there trying to end the war in Yemen. He will see him, but relations remain quite troubled between the White House and MBS.
So I know in the book you attempt to answer the question of where the story of MBS is headed, and without giving too much away, you also mentioned that the Icarus parallel ends with a question mark. We're not sure, but will we know where this story is headed until the king, or will it take the death of the king and the complete rule of MBS for us to really understand where things are headed?
Well, it will take at least until that, but I think it may take longer than just him taking over as king, because this is really a stigma. The murder of Jamal Khashoggi really remains a stigma over his head, and it will for a long time to come, that he authorized this. And he's trying to overcome it, and I would say he's partially overcome it. But every anniversary, October 2, certainly the Washington Post and other media are going to recall, and the human rights groups it's always going to come back to haunt him, what happened. It's going to take quite some time, I think, before people start forgetting what he did in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
And that's the way it ought to be, right? David Ottaway, thank you very much for joining us. Here's the book, Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia's Icarus, with a question. It's a great stocking stuffer. I checked. It does fit, David. So
My
please,
pleasure, John.
Great to see you as always. And to our viewers, we want to take this opportunity to wish you a happy and healthy holiday season. And thank you for joining us. Hope you'll do so again soon and that you'll have read David's book by then. Until then, for all of us at the center, I'm John Molesky. Thanks for being here.